Good evening and welcome. The violence in Tibet, the largest anti-China protests in 20 years, have repercussions not just for the Tibetan people and Beijing, but there's a fallout here in India as well. I'm standing here at the Nechung Monastery in Dharamshala, home of the Tibetan government in exile and the Dalai Lama. In the course of the next few minutes, we're going to try and explore all the different angles to this big story. Whether the Tibetan movement itself is becoming increasingly divided between the Dalai Lama's middle path and more younger radical Tibetans who want to take a different approach. And most of all, what India should and can do. Ever since the violence began in Tibet, every night there are diyas like these that are lit up across Dharamshala to remember those who live in Tibet. Well, just days after the violence, the Dalai Lama held a press conference here reiterating that he still stands for autonomy and not independence for Tibet. But it's an approach that increasingly many in the Tibetan community do not agree with. Especially now, they feel that things have reached a boiling point and that the middle path is no longer a viable option.
You know, we are not seeking separation, that everybody knows. Except Beijing do not know that. And otherwise, the rest of the world knows that.
At his first press conference after the news of the violence in Tibet became public, the Dalai Lama reiterated his middle path approach. The Tibetan spiritual leader had some tough words for Beijing as well, but the upshot remained the same: autonomy within China. But only a few hundred yards away, Tibetan protesters were saying something completely different. Independence for Tibet, nothing less.
Dear my younger brother, 14th Dalai Lama, you sold out Tibetan legitimate right. Like that. So many Tibetans very critical about our way of approach. But this is, I feel, this is a sign of, I think a healthy sign of our sort of commitment about democracy, open society.
We believe that independence is a birthright of every Tibetan, even they are born in exile community or they are born inside Tibet. But as being a Tibetan, independence is a birthright of every Tibetan community. So whether the middle way approach works out or not, I firmly believe that every Tibetan has to speak about independence because we are asking for something that is in the history.
What this demonstrates is that, Tibetans inside Tibet are completely against the illegal Chinese occupation of Tibet. So that's the end game, we're shooting at. So that's why we need all these protests to go on.
The differences in approach are not new. They've existed for many years. But the violence in Tibet, the worst anti-China protests in 20 years, may just be a turning point which could see the clamor for independence grow. That's why nearly every day these massive pro-independence protests are held here in Dharamshala. Despite the differences, analysts say the Tibetan movement has been united because of the Dalai Lama. But here is what everyone is afraid to ask. After him, who? There is no Tibetan leader who matches his stature or charisma, and many believe the movement will splinter without him. In Dharamshala with Manoj Thakur and Narhari, Nidhi Razdan for NDTV. In his own smiling way the other day, the Dalai Lama had this criticism for India. He said sometimes India is a little overcautious when it comes to Tibet. Well, India's dilemma is understandable. Over the years, Delhi has been trying hard to come closer to Beijing and has succeeded to a great extent. The question is, can India and should India do more for the Tibetans?
The government India's policy regarding China in general, in particular regarding Tibet, sometimes my little constructive criticism is the overcautious.
The Dalai Lama is angry. India's doublespeak on Tibet has given him reason. Last week, India stopped a group of Tibetans planning to march across India into Tibet.
As you know, the government of India does not permit Tibetans to engage in any anti-China political activities in India. And any person, whether an Indian national or a foreigner, is required to possess valid travel documents to cross the international border. Without possessing such travel documents, it is illegal to attempt crossing international borders. Government of India has the responsibility to maintain public order.